Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the webinar. So today, the webinar is all about the top 10 property questions at the moment related to lockdown and COVID, but actually any other issues you might be experiencing as well. So we're lucky here to have not myself, I'm Andy Sanford, by the way, Andy Sanford, Director of Improvement at We Are Lean and Agile. So we do process improvement stuff, but it's great to have two fantastic experts in the field. So I'll just let them introduce themselves. Neil, if you want to start off.
Yeah, so I'm Neil Tozer, Director at Ridgewater Property Limited, trade Ridgewater Sales and Lettings locally. So anything you want to know about sort of tenancies, we've got quite a lot of landlords, which is really, really nice. So any sort of tenant related issues that come up, but also buying and selling at the moment, obviously it's quite a tricky time. So we're going to kind of cover things that we can and can't do as an agent at the moment, but also some of the kind of legal requirements as a landlord that you still have to do, even though we're effectively in lockdown. So yeah, feel free, any questions, just put them in the chat or put them in Q&A, and we'll answer anything as we can as we go along. Rebecca.
Thanks, Neil. So my name's Rebecca Holloway. I am a partner, licensed conveyancer and head of residential property at Voice Hatton Solicitors. I deal with buying and selling properties, remortgages, refinancing, lease extensions, all that kind of thing. Obviously, it's a tricky time at the moment with buying and selling. We are still 100% open for business and progressing all of the property work that we can at the moment. As Voice Hatton also offers a number of other services, in particular landlord and tenant, which myself and Neil will be covering a little bit of, or I'll be helping him cover a little bit of today. We also offer family services, litigation. Our corporate property team is still very busy with buying and selling of businesses, which is great news. We've also got a very strong commercial property team also, and a very busy private client department at the moment. So any other questions, even if it's not property related, if I can answer, I will do. If not, I can come back to you at a later date once I've spoken to one of my colleagues.
Excellent. Thank you. So just to go through the agenda for today, so we'll just do a little bit on the various functions of the webinar for those of you that haven't been to one of our webinars before. And then we're going to go through the top 10 questions answered, and we're also going to have a Q&A at the end, but we will be interacting throughout the webinar with the chat as well. So next up, just to explain, the way the webinar is set up is very much, if you have a specific question you would like the speakers to answer, please put it in the Q&A area. The chat area is there for just general comments and anything between you saying hello, just like you've already used it for. And we're also going to use some polls throughout the webinar, just so that you can give us some information and things like that. So there are a couple of handouts. So the slides, we're going to give us a handout, and Neil's also given a couple of guides that he has created. So they will be available in the handouts later on. So don't worry about writing anything down that's in the slides. You will have this. And just the final thing from me about this, it will be available as a recorded webinar about 3 or 4 hours after the webinar finishes. So you will be able to go back and watch it if you can't stay for all of it. And also you can share it with anyone that you know who might have some issues and might benefit from seeing it. So without too much further ado, I think we're going into the first poll here. So just as I've realised I've missed an answer off there, but there we go. If you can click buying, if you're buying or selling, but which of these best describes you? Landlord, tenant, buying stroke selling, or homeowner not looking to move? That's great. It's good to see some results coming in there. Fantastic. Lots of landlords on, tenant, couple buying, one homeowner. Great stuff. So we seem to have got quite a lot of the votes there. I'll leave it another couple of seconds before I just launch the second one. Second question for context is, are you looking at buying or selling in the next 6 months? So it'd be good to know where people are, whether they're looking, or the maybe option there really is about, I really don't know at the moment. I might have been thinking about it, but this is putting me right off at the moment. So quite a lot not looking to move. That's interesting. Okay, so we're now going to step over to our experts in the room rather than the person who's just working the tech. So I'm going to
person we need.
I shall pass across now to Neil, and we'll get started.
Brilliant, thanks, Andy. Thanks for answering the polls. It just gives us a really good flavour of kind of who's in the room, really. So quite a lot of landlord and tenants. So we can kind of focus what we're answering along that kind of side. So one of the main things we've been asked quite a lot is about really if I'm renting, does my landlord have to do essential repairs, or on the other hand, if I'm a landlord, do I still have to do essential repairs? So it has really changed. So you sort of still have to do essential repairs, certainly, especially things that might come under the Fitness for Human Habitation Act. So that would be things sort of like dealing with sort of damp issues, heating issues, sanitation, and things like that. So the thing is really, I think, is tenants have to be a little bit aware of what they're reporting to their landlord. So small issues that can wait, then brilliant. Just leave those issues until things are a little bit less locked down. As an agent, we've got contractors that are sort of happy to go out to issues that are essential. So they're doing their own kind of risk assessments to assess whether it's safe for them to go to a property and how they can best access the property as well. So kind of working with the tenant to maybe do it at a time that the tenant's out doing their daily exercise. So that might be a good time for a contractor to go in, fix a boiler. The contractor doing things like taking wipes with them so that they can wipe the boiler down when they're finished, and then leave the house, hopefully as if they've never been there. So if tenants have to be in a property, then there's things they can do to kind of socially distance themselves from the contractor. So maybe go into another room while the contractor's fixing what they need to fix. Open the door, step back, let the contractor in. So it's kind of we're taking a view really, non-essential things can kind of wait. So if it's a dripping tap, it's not going to be too much of a problem if that's kind of dripping for another week or so. But if you've got no heating, then if you're a tenant, report it to your landlord. Don't sit and suffer with things like no hot water or no heating, thinking that no one can come out and help you, because there are things that we can kind of do, and your landlord should be doing as well. So the landlord's legal responsibility to look after you as a tenant hasn't in effect changed. So I hope that kind of answers. If anyone's kind of got any little bits that that they want to answer that you want to ask down in the chat, I'll try and read the chat as I'm talking to you as well.
So I guess, Neil, just a point there. I guess non-essential work, you would also say to people that if it escalates, they need to notify you again, because it's not a case of saying, no, if it gets worse, we're not going to do it. If it's getting worse, you need to keep your agent and landlord updated with the situation.
Yeah, so certainly, something like a good example of that might be something like a drip under a sink, for instance. So if it's a drip that can be contained in like a small container, and you might have to empty that every day or so, then that's not really too much of an issue. It can wait if necessary. But if that leak starts to get worse, then you kind of need to obviously like I said, keep your landlord informed. So keep in touch with your tenants if you're a landlord. Keep in touch with your tenant maybe if they've reported an issue. Maybe check back with them every couple of days. Is it still okay? Has it got any worse? Because we can still need to still come out. Got something in the chat there from Dean. Thanks, Dee. We'll cover this actually in the next question. We'll talk about some of those bits. So we'll cover that in a sec about gas safety certificates in particular. But do the essential maintenance. So if stuff needs doing, still get it done, and still report it if you're a tenant as well.
Brilliant.
Hope that's answered that one. If I'm landlord still, so hopefully, hang on just 1 second.
You disappeared.
Rebecca, did you say something to offend him?
Yeah, probably.
Just came up on my screen that my battery was going to go, and I realised I hadn't flicked the switch on the plug to actually. I'm all right. I was going to lose you all. Dee, this will hopefully answer your question, and probably many others are kind of in the group thinking similar things. So yeah, your legal responsibility as a landlord hasn't changed at all. So gas safety certificates do still need to be done, and from what we're hearing, there won't be any kind of particular leeway on it. An interesting thing that people maybe don't know is you can get a gas safety certificate done up to 2 months before its expiry date. So a little bit like an MOT on a car, you can have it done early, but it's dated from the 12-month expiry date. So in effect, you can kind of get a 14-month gas safety certificate and have it done early. So what we did as an agent, when we knew that lockdown was likely to come, we've done pretty much all of our gas safety certificates that we could do up until around about the end of May. We got them done during March and early April. We've still been getting in and doing them. So if you can, then contact your tenants as early as possible. If you know that you've got one that's running out, get in touch with your tenants, rather than leaving it till like 2 days before and suddenly going, you need to do it. So Roger, if a tenant won't let you in to visit, obviously that it can be a problem, especially if they're self-isolating. So they might be very cautious about letting somebody in, which is completely understandable, especially if it's maybe an elderly person. All I would say with that is keep records of every conversation that you have with them. If possible, do it via email if they will, so that so you can so that you can get you've got on record that you've tried everything possible to get that gas safety done. It's not just you as a landlord that's maybe kind of forgotten to do it, but it's actually the tenant that's stopping you going in. One of the reasons we've been trying to get them done as early as possible is so that if people are self-isolating for maybe the 14 days, the household, we've got plenty of time to get it done after that. So they might be self-isolated for 14 days, and then they can let people in. Had a question there just saw pop up about whether we can let you know about engineers that are still working locally. Yeah, we can do that. Maybe we'll sort of email me later, and I can certainly give you the name of a couple of plumbers that are still doing gas safeties for us. Electrical certificates, John, yeah, really good. I was just about to mention gas electrical certificates. So electrical certificates are going to be law from July for any new tenancies. So anyone moving in to a rented property from sort of end of June onwards, you will have to have an electrical certificate. We kind of see it's going to be a bit of an issue, we think, because if things don't come out of lockdown until sort of end of May, we think there's going to be quite a massive change of tenancies at that point. A lot of people moving, and all of a sudden you've then got to try and find an electrician to go into your property, do an electrical check, but not only do the check, they've then got to do the work that's associated with getting a pass. So if you've got properties, try and get the electrical certificates done as soon as possible. We've got electricians that are quite happily going into empty properties, obviously, and they'll go in. They can do the electrical safe check. So if you're a landlord with a property that's empty, now's a really good time to get in touch with a local electrician, get them in to do your electrical check now, and then you're kind of ahead of the game. We've kind of known it's been coming for a little while. It's kind of been on the cards for a couple of years, but they only kind of passed it into law a few months ago, really. But so we've been kind of getting ready for it. But yeah, if you've got a property that is empty, get it done now, and then you've got it done. Then maybe whether they extend it, we don't know. But I don't think they will. I think it'll probably still come into law as that then. And has government advised yet on what certificates will need to be obtained? I think it's just going to be the general electrical certification that they do on like a new build house installation, or when they come and do a test on a property that will be like the whole circuit. I don't think they've actually kind of really specified exactly what it is, but we just imagine it's going to be the normal electrical test certificate where they'll test all the circuits in the house.
Great. Great.
So yeah, I think the other thing is energy performance certificates. So the energy performance certificate rules changed in April, that any tenancy, any sort of any performance certificate valid on a property has to be an E or above. So hopefully landlords have been doing the work to get these up to date over the past sort of 12 months. But if you're a landlord and you've in effect got a property that's got an EPC that's an F or a G rating, in effect that tenancy is now breaking the law. The problem is landlords that have left it to the last minute to get it sorted, and then obviously lockdown was end of March, things started all changed, and maybe they haven't been able to get that done. So again, I would, if you're in that situation, get your EPC sort of updated just as quickly as possible. And whether you can use the excuse of lockdown, I think they're probably going to say that you actually had kind of a year to do it, really. So so listed properties, got from Graham. Listed properties aren't exempt from the EPC regulations unless they're on the exemption register. So they're not automatically exempt. So if you've got a listed property, you basically have to get an EPC done so that you can then register it as exempt if you're unable to bring it up to standard. So the reason that they've sort of said that EPCs or that there's exemptions on listed properties, basically if you can't get it up to the required standard because of its listing status. So if you can't change double glazing or single glazing to double glazing, sometimes you might not be able to put in gas central heating, so it might mean cutting a flue through the sort of side of the building, which might be listed and they might not allow you to do it. So it's a little bit of a kind of a grey, well, not so much grey area, but a lot of confusion over it, where people think that their property, if it's listed, it's automatically exempt, but in effect, you still have to get an EPC done on it. I hope that it is a little bit of a nightmare. But Graham, if you want any more on that, give us a call, and we can quite happily give you a bit more advice on that.
Rebecca, was there anything from the legal perspective on those certificate issues, or is it still up in the air?
I think Neil pretty much covered it all, really. Fiona, my colleague, gave me some notes on these earlier on this week. So I think pretty much he's covered everything from the legal requirement side.
Great.
I think we've got a few questions, haven't we? Published questions. Did you want to go on to the next slide first and then do some more of the questions after that?
Sure. So we've got a poll coming up now, and I just wanted to highlight, sorry, it's a mistake of mine. We are trying to use the Q&A because obviously we've got some quite technical questions. So we've moved a number of questions into the Q&A area that we'll look at the end. If there are ones where you are also wanting to see them, please do upvote those particular Q&A so that we know what the most important, and we'll tackle them. We're getting loads and loads of questions, which is brilliant. So I'll just re-emphasize as well in terms of what we'll do is we will pick some of these up afterwards with you, because we won't be able to answer everything in detail right now.
Okay.
So just seeing there, we've got some poll results there. Has the current situation put you off? Probably only 28% saying yes, but I suppose that's, oh no, 35. That's going up now. So yes, it has put some people off. So we'll move into the next question now. There you go.
Okay, so can I move house at the present time? Now, it's important to point out that the government haven't said you can't move house, so it's not prohibited, but they have given a lot of guidance around moving. So there's several scenarios to discuss here. First one I will discuss are for clients who have already exchanged contracts. So this mainly happened when we first went into lockdown, where we'd already exchanged on a lot of matters that were then set for completion within, a week or 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown. Obviously, when you exchange contracts and set your completion date, that is a legally binding contract between the parties. Therefore, if you want to try and defer the completion date, so under the current government guidelines, they are suggesting that clients discuss between themselves, i.e. via their legal advisors, as to whether they can defer the completion date for a longer period, hopefully when we've come out of lockdown. Now, sometimes that is possible, sometimes it isn't. If they're in a chain and someone is going to be potentially made homeless, then people may still need to move. And it's important that they do follow the government guidelines in place if they do have to move. For instance, they may have difficulties because removal companies are not now working. So there was some advice given that potentially companies were hiring, you could still hire a van to move yourself, following the social distancing guidelines. There's also been suggestions of people going into other people's property. Obviously, you would then be looking to deep clean that property, just in case there are any traces of COVID-19. But you are advised that if you are self-isolating, that you have symptoms, or that if you have COVID-19, that you should not be moving. And hopefully the parties, via your legal advisors, will understand and be able to agree to defer the completion date to a time when it is actually safe to move. A few other transactions still can complete, so if you've exchanged contracts and you're looking to move into an unoccupied property, so it's completely empty, then as long as you follow the government guidelines, you can still move into that property, or you could still complete and move in at a later date after lockdown if you don't need to move into that particular property. Obviously, we have a number of clients who are buying to eventually rent out or to do up and sell on, and so obviously they are still able to complete those purchases. Also, things to make sure of if you have exchange and you're completing. So for instance, if you had slightly longer date in between exchange and completion and you haven't yet completed, is to just make sure that if you are obtaining mortgage finance, that the mortgage lenders are still happy to lend the money, that your solicitor's likely to receive the mortgage advance. So your legal advisors will be checking all of this on your behalf and should be keeping you fully informed, so that if there are any issues, they can be sorted out as soon as possible. For those other clients who haven't exchanged yet, but who want to move, we are still very much progressing that work for those clients. So although a lot of firms have furloughed a lot of their staff, and are working with skeleton staff who are either working remotely or self-isolating, maybe in their office if it's a small office, we are still able to progress that work for those clients, so that either when we come out of lockdown or when the restrictions have been changed slightly to enable people to move, that we can do that fairly quickly. And it seems to me at the moment that a lot of clients are still keen to move when the time is right. They still want their transactions progressed. Obviously, we as solicitors and conveyancers, different size firms, working slightly different ways, and therefore obviously we're reliant on the other party on the other side to be able to still work, to progress matters, in order to move things along. So the answer is yes and no. You've got to cover the government, got to look at the government guidelines when we're looking at this, but it's really important that you keep in touch with your legal advisors to make sure that any questions you have, they're able to answer, and if there's any difficulties, your legal advisors, it's important that you speak to them, and hopefully people are going to be fairly reasonable and pragmatic when it comes to things. We shouldn't be seen as legal advisors to be encouraging people to move if it's not appropriate for them to move, i.e. if there's a big chain of transactions, then we can make sure that we can get everything up to speed for those clients, so that when it is safe to move, that they can do so. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to mention there. Obviously happy to answer any other questions that may come along from that.
Okay, so number 4.
Okay, so number 4 again is for myself. So we are still very much open for business, along with moving house, buying and selling property. We can still deal with remortgages, refinancing. So some lenders, actually I think a report came out yesterday that some lenders are now, that originally was withdrawing slightly higher loan to value offers, they're now reoffering those, so I think it's 85% loan to value, and there are some lenders who have issued mortgages, mortgage offers to clients that are still happy to proceed with those offers. Some of the lenders for, say, the buy-to-let market, we have heard of some of them have withdrawn funding, but I think it really depends on how long this pandemic goes on for, as to how that's going to affect lenders and what money they're going to lend people. So we are still very much dealing with remortgages. Obviously no one needs to move house with remortgages and refinancing, so we're very much proceeding with all of those transactions. We're also dealing with a lot of transfer of equity work, so especially from like our matrimonial department. So if you're removing your ex-partner ex-husband, ex-wife from the title and they're refinancing as well at the same time, or it's just the transfer of an unmortgaged property, then we're still very much able to proceed with those transactions. I have quite a few clients who are either buying or selling tenanted properties. So again, when nobody needs to move, we're still very much able to proceed with those transactions. And a few of mine are actually going through at the moment. We are still finding that clients are still keen to proceed, but we haven't had any that have fallen out of bed with regard to those transactions, which is really encouraging. Again, like I mentioned before, empty properties. So for instance, probate sales, all those kind of properties that are empty, we're still very much able to proceed with those. And as I say, I have clients that are keen to go ahead and are still setting dates. Obviously with regard to those, ones with mortgage finances, so we are advising clients it's probably best to effect a simultaneous exchange and completion so that everything's done on the same day, so that we can ensure that we receive the mortgage advance from the mortgage lender, just in case there are any issues with them not giving the funding. So again, no one's moving house or anything. It's fairly straightforward to do a simultaneous exchange and completion, and that way we've safeguarded our client against entering into a contract that they can't then complete. So I think we've, not sure, I've heard though via estate agents that some clients have been able to view properties prior to lockdown, so they're still making offers on properties. We are still getting new matters come through the door, so new sales and purchases. I know Bridgewater, you guys offer virtual tours of your properties, and I very much think that
is definitely
and I think Dan sent me a new job for a lady selling a property, and the buyers had a virtual tour. They were first-time buyers and they put in an offer. So we are proceeding with those kind of transactions, and also perhaps if clients have seen property several weeks ago that their offer wasn't accepted, but they're now obviously it's fallen through or something, and then the vendor comes back to them and says, yeah, I will accept your offer. Those kind of transactions are still going through. The other options I have seen, although I haven't advised on it at this point in time, is mainly probably for cash buyers, is that we could potentially exchange contracts with a long stop completion date with explicit clauses to cover COVID-19 in the event that we couldn't complete on the stated date. So for clients who really want to exchange contracts, who are keen to proceed with purchases, those with mortgages, obviously we would have to advise the clients anyway of all the risks of them entering into the contract if they couldn't then fulfill it. And obviously it would depend on the circumstances of each individual case. And again, as legal advisors, we have to look at everything and advise the clients on every scenario. But at the end of the day, the clients, we have to work with the client's instructions on the basis that we've given them all the relevant required advice. A few other things I wanted to talk about is valuations. So I understand that valuations are still going ahead, but not in the usual fashion. So some are able to proceed and be carried out because the property may be empty, and those particular valuers or surveyors are still working and are still going out to empty properties. The other is that some of them are doing desktop valuations. I would imagine they're probably more of the lower end of the loan to value than the higher end, and some of them are doing, I understand, desktop valuations and drive-by valuations, so the two combined, so that they can still get the mortgage offers out for the clients they've agreed to lend the money to, in principle. So obviously properties that are occupied and they can't do a desktop valuation, then those won't be able to be done until after lockdown and it's safe to do so. Obviously I've discussed the mortgage offer scenario. with what's happening with those and the risks. And again, speak to your legal advisors. They are the best people to speak to. I have been able to extend several mortgage offers for clients, so transactions that have been going for a little while. They're in a chain, and they were ready to proceed just before lockdown, and now obviously they can't proceed. I think the government have asked lenders if they can extend for a period of 3 months, but I have recently secured a few on 2-month extensions. That is both buy-to-let and residential mortgages. So I think that's a good sign that the lenders are still being a bit flexible when it comes to those scenarios. I also wanted to just briefly mention searches. So like us trying to work remotely, it's the same for the local authorities. So some of them had to close briefly. There are delays at the moment for certain councils, but I think people need to sort of be understanding of the situation at the moment, that everyone's doing, you know, as much as they can to try and progress matters, progress the searches. It's only really mainly the local searches. I think some of the searches we carry out are able to be done from the desktop, so there's no issues with those coming through. And then also just to mention, you know, working alongside other solicitors, we very much at Voice Hatton do liaise with other local solicitors to see how they're getting on, see how they're doing, how long transactions are taking, obviously working together to progress the ones that we can do and support each other really at this time, which is nice, you know, because I think that's how we all should be at the moment in supporting each other through all of this. So I think that's mainly what I wanted to discuss. So, you know, as I say, we are still very much open for business and doing what we can, and we're here to support our clients in any way we can. So yeah.
Brilliant. So we're just gonna, I think, yeah, we've got another quick poll that will be popping up in front of you right now. So just mindful of the time here. We've got lots of Q&A coming in, which is great. And we'll stop around and do some of that. We will definitely have to pick up some of these questions offline afterwards, but that's not a problem. So
just before we go on to the next one, Andy, just from a lettings point of view on transactions, we are still able to move people into properties. So we have done a couple during lockdown. Those are kind of ones that have been either viewed before, so we've organised a move in prior to the situation changing, and people would have been kind of possibly homeless if we hadn't have moved them in. Viewings wise, we've got virtual tours of most of our properties, so people can view a property without actually going through it. So although we're not physically meeting people at properties and doing viewings, we are able to kind of do the whole move-in process without meeting anyone. All of our paperwork is electronically signed, for instance. So even the tenancy agreements are all signed electronically. Things like the right to rent checks, they change the rules on that very slightly, so that we can actually do the right to rent check over a video call. So, you know, people hold up their ID and we go, yeah, that's correct, and then we can get a copy of that ID, so we don't have to meet them face to face. So if you're using an agent that's geared up to do everything electronically, then things can still be done, and people can still move in. So we've done a couple of kind of property handovers. We haven't actually kind of handed anything. We've done it all kind of virtually, and kind of left keys in a state, or literally met somebody at the property, left a key for them, stepped away, and literally the last thing they need to do is take the key off us, and that's it. So we have done a couple of ones for either vulnerable people or kind of key worker people who are kind of working at local hospitals and kind of needed accommodation. sometimes to kind of self-isolate themselves away from family and things like that. So I think Graham just asked a question about that. So hopefully that'll answer a bit of your question there, Graham, about sort of lettings transactions.
Yeah, so this poll, interestingly, split 50-50 straight down the middle. 50% of people experiencing problems to do with property. So question 5, that's Neil. Is it?
Yeah.
So is anything to help sell my property for once lockdown is over? So what we're kind of advising people to do really is spend the time you have got. I know there was a question or a chat came up earlier on about whether you could go and decorate a property that's empty. I would say certainly, if you can do it safely, if you can get the paint safely, and you're not, especially if it's fairly local, you're not having to travel a long way to go and do it. But if you kind of own a house very close to where you are and you want to go and sort of decorate it, if you're looking to sell a house in the next few months, then I've been walking up and down my street recently during my my allowed kind of exercise of the day, and the number of people that are out painting the front of their houses. Everyone seems to be painting their garage door at the moment. It seems to be the in thing to do is to repaint your garage door. But people are using the time to get their house looking as good as possible. And either from a selling point of view or a rental point of view, if you've got an empty rental house, then maybe it's a great time to go and spend a bit of time giving it a bit of a spruce up. You don't quite often get the chance during tenancies, sort of there might only be a week between one tenancy and the other. So if you've got a property that's sat there empty, it is really annoying that you're losing the rent on that property for a couple of months, which a lot of landlords struggle with. But actually try and look at it from a positive point of view and use the time you've got to do what you can to get the property looking better. And actually you might be able to add rental value to it for when we do kind of then be able to advertise it and do viewings on properties again. You can quite easily add £50 a month rental to a property by sort of getting it looking really nice, and it's amazing what difference it can make. And from a selling point of view, if you've got that sort of those odd little jobs that you never get around to finishing, I know we've got hundreds of jobs around our house where we've kind of almost finished a room, and there's just little bits like the skirting's not quite done or things like that. You use the time to do it and sort of get that done. There is one of the handouts is actually that you can do. We'll kind of make available to you a bit later on. Is about kind of how to sell your house quicker. A lot of that is kind of some tips that you can do to get your house looking better. So declutter it. So use the time to kind of go through all the junk that you've got lying around and get it ready to chuck out. Make it, repaint some walls, clean all the windows, weed the front garden and things like that, and just spend your time as best you can. So that's And the other thing that we're doing about sort of selling houses is we're kind of working with some of our vendors about doing virtual viewings. So we can kind of get them on a Zoom call with somebody who wants to view a property, and they can kind of show people around their house as if they were walking around. Or we can also kind of share our screen with someone doing a virtual tour, and we can kind of do a walk around of a property using the virtual tour while we've got the vendor looking at the property as well. And they can ask questions about the house at the same time, sort of, is that a real fire over there? Or does the fireplace work? Or is there parking? And, go out, look around the garden with people and talk and view it as if we're doing a viewing. So there's things that we can do during lockdown and once lockdown's finished. I know, Rebecca, you've got something to add on this as well from a legal point of view.
Yeah, so for clients who are looking to buy, even if they haven't found a particular property or seen something online that they wanted to put an offering on, then we can provide estimates still for you. We can also send you out the paperwork to complete, and also mainly for sales as well. If you're looking to sell but you haven't yet put it on the market, again, we can provide you with an estimate for cost for sale based on a rough sale price, and also send you the property forms that you need to complete so that they are ready for when you have got a buyer, and we can get the contract papers out fairly quickly. It is also important to note that if you've had anything done to your property, so for instance, new windows, replacement boilers, any electrical work, and you've got all the certificates, make sure you get those certificates out, look them out even before you put your property on the market. Planning documents, those kind of things, because we will need all of that information to send to the buyers' solicitors. And very often the clients, it takes them a little while to locate the paperwork. So during this period, it might be a good time to get all your documents together and ready for when your property can go on the market, or when you receive an offer, if it is on the market at the moment. It's always a good idea to get everything up to date, so that we can send out the papers quickly, and then that will help speed things up because there'll be less questions being asked to provide it all. So that was just the point to make. Brilliant. For that one from me. Yeah.
Excellent. That little list of jobs that never gets done is all the jobs in my house.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next question then.
One very quick thing I just want to cover. Jason, thank you. Mitch made a really good point about sort of doing transactions. About the only bit of paper we're getting tenants to sign when they move in, actually physically wet sign, is about testing smoke alarms. So one of the legal requirements is that basically there were working smoke alarms in the property on the day the tenant moved in, and you've got to be able to kind of prove this. If if challenged, you've got to be able to say, yes, my tenant tested these smoke alarms and they were working. So absolutely right, Jason. What we're doing is we're basically getting tenants to push the button on their smoke alarm, check it's working, and then just sign that bit of paper to say, yes, there was a smoke alarm on each floor of my property, and they were working when I moved in. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Jason. So yeah, I'll move on to the next question now.
Brilliant.
So can we still do viewings on properties? I suppose yes and no, really, is the answer. So physical viewings, we're not really doing. Obviously, meeting people at properties and walking around. It's been made quite clear to us in the kind of industry press that the government has really said, no, you shouldn't be doing viewings. It's not essential travel. It's not essential business. So basically, there's no real reason that we should be going to a property and doing a physical viewing. What we are doing though, and we've sold properties through this over the past couple of weeks, and we've rented properties through this, is we're doing virtual tours on properties. So we've got a bit of kit. If none of you have kind of seen the virtual tours that we do, it is basically like walking into the room. So we've got a camera that basically scans the whole room, takes loads of pictures, and then builds up a walkthrough of the property, and you can kind of walk from each room. So we're doing quite a lot of those. We're pointing people in the direction of our virtual tours. We can do an assisted virtual tour, we're basically calling them, where we'll walk through the property with somebody, either both of us having it up at the same time on a screen, or doing something like a Zoom call where we can share a screen and we can walk them through a virtual tour. The other thing that we've done with a few of our vendors that are kind of happy to appear on video is they've actually done a Zoom call on like a mobile phone with somebody, or even like a Facebook or a sort of WhatsApp video call, and they'll walk around the property with video and show people the property as they're walking around, and the vendor can then answer questions particularly that come up. So there's a few ways that we're kind of learning ways very quickly of doing viewings on properties that weren't possible before. And actually, it's kind of changing the way we're doing, but I think it will change a bit the way we do business in the future as well. So I think we'll kind of do a lot more virtual tours with people, even when lockdown has finished. So actually, it's a really great way of doing a first viewing on a property, because I know when I've viewed properties in the past, quite often you walk in and you go, actually, this really isn't the right property for me, and you would have kind of completely wasted everyone's time turning up for review. Sometimes you dismiss properties because you don't actually go walk inside them. So the property my partner and I bought a couple of years ago, we'd scrolled past it loads of times on Zoopla because the front picture was awful. The agent had taken the picture and it went to the house for us, and we were put off by the outside. So had there been a virtual tour on that property, had we been encouraged to do a virtual tour, we would have probably gone and done a viewing on it an awful lot earlier. So yeah, definitely we still can do viewings to an extent, and we can do what we can to keep an interest in properties. Obviously, the other thing we can do is we can do viewings on property, virtual viewings on properties. We can then have a chat with people after that. Quite a lot of them are going, yeah, I'm really interested in that property. Can you let me know as soon as you can do viewings? So we're then able to sort of get that list of people ready to go that we know are very, very interested in a specific property.
So, yeah, so the key is stay in touch then. So we got
yeah, that's the biggest thing, really.
Yeah, we've got one more poll coming up here. So just if you have property, where is it? And just mindful of time, guys, we don't need to shoot off, obviously, but we've got 7 minutes of the allotted time left. And I think the next few answers are a little bit quicker. But as I say, I keep repeating this, we will pick up your queries afterwards. So please don't worry. Lots of good stuff in the Q&A. So next question.
So can I still market? Yes, definitely. So we are still marketing properties. If properties, especially rental properties, if it's a property that comes up for relet and it's something that we've had on our books before, we've got existing photographs. When you market a property, really you're supposed to use up-to-date photos so that you don't obviously want to mislead people if it's got a brand new kitchen in it that was actually put in 7 years ago. It's so we don't want to mislead people with the property. But where we are marketing properties that might have older photographs, we're kind of making it clear in the description that the photographs unfortunately are older photographs, but we will update them as soon as we can, so people aren't sort of looking at it thinking it's all just brand new carpet, brand new decoration, and it's maybe 5 years old or something like that. So, but yes, we can still market properties. There's kind of a little bit of a disadvantage to doing it in some ways, which is if we market a property now, as soon as we put it on something like Zoopla, it will appear right at the top of the searches on Zoopla, and over time it drops down the searches. So if a property is then marketed for maybe, say, 4 weeks' time, we come out of lockdown, that property that's been marketed will have dropped down the listings. So it's whether you want to kind of advertise it now and start getting the interest. And obviously we have rented properties during lockdown. So, it's kind of a, let's advertise it now and we can try and get some interest in it and try and get a tenant in it. Or do you wait until we can do viewings and then market it, and then it appears at the top of searches and you generate that interest very quickly? The only other way of getting it back up the levels is to reduce the rent level or reduce the asking price. So there are ways that we can do it, and it might just be a £5 rent reduction. We'll jump it back up. It kind of like appears as a new, as like the property search portals treat it like a new property at that point, but you've obviously had to do a rent reduction to do it. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, I think. I think we're taking the view really of you're probably best to market and start getting the interest. There are an awful lot of people that are sat at home at the minute. I think I'm trying to think what it was. So yes, searches have increased around about 30% on the portal, but they're not sending through inquiries. So I think there's an awful lot of people that are sat bored at home because there's nothing else to do. So they're kind of researching their properties now. So they're not contacting agents. So our inquiry level has really dropped because I think people just know we can't do viewings. So they're not sending the inquiries through, but they are searching for properties. And interestingly, there's been a massive surge apparently in the searches for properties with gardens. So you can kind of see why people are kind of sat at home. And I really wish I had a garden. So yeah, I think definitely can market to an extent, but it's something to have a conversation with your agent and then have a chat through whether it's best to market now and get the interest or wait and market when things start back up again.
That's a really interesting couple of points there, mate. I wouldn't have thought of either of those, I don't think. So next question coming up for you. I won't leave it on the slide too much, but you'll have the poll popping up for you in a second, and we'll move on to number 8 because I'm mindful of the time. So, and this is the super mystic Meg.
Did I get my crystal ball out?
Yeah, let's get your crystal ball out, and let's what do you guys think, around this?
Myself, I think there's going to be quite a surge in property movement once we can start doing viewings again, once we can market again. If you kind of think about it, spring is normally the busiest time for property movement. So traditionally, the market has always peaked in kind of March, April time is normally one of the busiest times for property sales. Rental tends to be quite a flat market the whole year, we find. So we get pretty much the same number of move-ins every month. It doesn't fluctuate that much. But from a sales point of view, especially, I think kind of June will become the new spring in the sales market. And I think an awful lot of people are going to be sat at home now, wishing they didn't live in the property that they lived in, or lived in the area they live in. I was speaking to a chap the other day who lives up in London. His view is basically of a brick wall from a tower block opposite. He's got a tiny little balcony, and although it's he lives in a fairly nice area of London, it's still very, very compact. And he was saying he can do his job from home, and he's come to the realization that actually it doesn't matter where he lives. And he really likes Torquay, and he was ringing me about some advice on buying a property in Torquay. But he said people that he knows that live in the city, a lot of thinking the same thing. They're kind of thinking if this ever happens again, they don't want to be living in the middle of a big city when it happens. And more and more people have realised they can work from home. So, and I think more and more companies have probably realised their employees can work from home. So I think there'll be quite a big kind of exodus of people moving into places like the southwest that want to have a nicer lifestyle, a nicer area to be, if this ever happens again.
Do you think it will have a big impact on the prices at the moment? So do you think you'll see a slight decline in the sale and purchase prices of any properties at the moment?
I think if anything, it could go the other way, because I think there could be a lot of people wanting to move. So I don't think there'll be a particular dip in house prices. I think people that desperately
maybe in London,
yeah, everyone moves out. But I think people that are desperate to sell now, I think there are people out there that are probably putting in silly offers, and kind of going, actually, and I know there are sometimes it gets the exchange day and people suddenly come back and then go, actually, I'm going to offer a load of money less to kind of almost, sort of blackmail the situation into taking a dip in price. I don't think it happens an awful lot around the southwest. We don't see it an awful lot, thankfully. But I know it is kind of a bit of a tactic some investors use in other parts of the country, definitely. So I think where there's desperation to move, people might be putting in offers. But I think once the market gets back to a little bit of normality, we're thinking there's going to be quite a lot of movement in the market. And obviously, when there's movement, there tends to be price increases, because the more people want properties, it kind of pushes the prices up, if anything. So I think it will probably be fairly positive, the market. I think from a rental point of view as well, we've got a lot of people that are under notice at the minute, and that might be notice that they've served to us as an agent, or it might be notices that agents have served on tenants for different reasons. And obviously all those people haven't been able to move for the past, probably be 2 or 3 months by the time it all starts getting back to normal. So there's almost going to be like a big kind of backlog of people that want to move and haven't been able to. And all of a sudden it's kind of floodgates open and everyone's going to be able to move house. So we're kind of thinking it's going to be a really busy time in the market.
I'm sort of thinking along the same lines. We've got a lot of clients who are keen to proceed when they can. New transactions coming in, obviously not as much as normal, because people can't get out and view properties. And I suppose some of it will depend on whether the valuers think that the property values have changed. But I think it just really depends on how long the pandemic goes on for, how long the lockdown's in place for, as to how badly it is going to be affected. And I think, like you say, you will get some clients, especially investor clients, who are looking for a bargain, who will think because of this they can get a significant amount of money off. And I think it's just a little bit at the moment, the unknown. But I like you think hopefully it's very popular, especially living down here, for people to buy and sell. So hopefully the quicker we can get through this, I think the better things will still be anyway.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of it does depend on how long things go on for. There was an article in the in the kind of industry press the other day that kind of hinted towards the fact that agents will probably be one of the first industries kind of allowed back. Because a lot of what we do is at distance, so we don't particularly need to see people face to face a lot. So hopefully that is true, and estate agents, letting agents can get back to a sort of normality. We're already planning. We'll be changing the way we work to be able to accommodate social distancing within our business going forward. Certainly.
Yeah, I think everyone's keen on the next couple of questions.
So let's kick that one on. That was brilliant. Next two relate to a lot of the questions people are putting in the chat.
So what do I do if my tenant says they can't pay the rent? What we're doing as an agent is we're basically having a chat with those tenants individually, obviously. First of all, finding out whether it's a genuine can't pay the rent, or whether they're using the situation as an excuse to not pay the rent. And I don't want to kind of that sound kind of harsh towards tenants. We have got tenants that are genuinely experiencing issues, but we've also spoken to a few tenants that are kind of saying, I can't pay my rent this month because of COVID. And then we're going, okay, so what has changed in your circumstances? And they're saying, oh, well, I've been furloughed, so I'm only getting 80% of my pay. And we're then having a conversation with people sort of saying, well, what does that look like for you? What is your income now, and what was it last month? And the government is throwing, I think think I saw a figure yesterday, something like 120 billion pounds or something like that, something ridiculous like that, at this issue. The whole reason that they're throwing all this money at the issue is so that people can continue to do things like pay their rent, and pay their standard bills. People should be spending an awful lot less money as well. So I know my credit card bill is an awful lot lower this month than it has been for ages. Simply because we're not going out. We're not going out spending money on the other things. We're not filling the car up with fuel. So actually, I think the question is really have a chat with your tenant, find out why they are struggling, point them in the direction as well of things like universal credit claims. A lot of people don't think that they will be entitled to universal credit because it's only short-term changes. But actually most people are entitled to some kind of help through universal credit. And it might be, say, people, if they've taken an 80% or the 20% hit on their salary, well, pay me 80% of the rent for now, and then we can kind of work on the other 20% when you get back. Steve, nice to see you on, Steve. One of the things Steve mentioned is obviously once people get into arrears, it gets harder and harder to get that money back. So if they miss a full month, and they might be kind of £600 a month tenant, trying to get that money back is going to be really difficult. Our wages ourselves, we're only actually experiencing around about it's less than 2% of our tenancies are actually not paying us rent at the moment. So it's a really, really low proportion. And those are ones that we've spoken to, and they're genuinely having massive problems. Tends to be kind of self-employed people that aren't going to get any money until maybe June because they can't work, and they're not getting any income or they're not getting any help until they get the help from the government, which isn't going to come out until like June. So those ones we're kind of working with. We probably
sorry, no, just a quick point there. It's definitely worth the tenants contacting the council as well. There are funds, there are hardship funds,
absolutely. So they
can access.
Yeah, so the council can look at doing what's called discretionary housing payment, and they can help pay arrears. Just so you might not be entitled to a full housing benefit claim or universal credit claim, but they can sometimes help if it's going to prevent homelessness or something like that. So there's things that the council can do. But I think if you're a tenant, I've got a couple of tenants on here, not many, but if you are a tenant and you're experiencing rent issues, then speak to your landlord. Don't bury your head in the sand. Pick up the phone to your landlord and be honest with him and say, look, I'm really struggling with my rent. I can pay you 50% at the minute, but I can't pay you the rest. Can we work out a kind of a thing to get them on that? But we are kind of, without being too harsh with tenants, we are kind of asking them the questions. And we've probably got 2% that are struggling. We've had another probably 2% that have rung us up saying, I can't pay the rent. And when we've asked them all the questions and said, can you tell me why you can't pay the rent? Show me the sums, if you like, what your income is, what your outgoings are, why you can't pay the rent. We're finding that other 2%, within an hour, the money's in the bank account, and then they've paid the rent because they've gone, I'm not going to get away with that. And they're just paying the rent. So I think if you're a landlord and you manage your own properties, then kind of have that conversation with them and don't, be nosy. And we've had a couple of tenants have a bit of a go at us, sort of saying, why are you asking us all these personal questions? But I've got to go to my landlords that we manage their properties. I've got to go to them and go, this person can't pay the rent because of this. And I don't want to go to my landlord and say, this person can't be bothered to pay the rent this month, sorry. That's not what, as an agent, that's not our job. Our job is to try our best to get a resolution to any rent arrears. And I think if there are genuine rent arrears, then work with the tenant, put something in place to get some kind of payment from them. Or as soon as things get back to normal, then agree a structured kind of repayment plan on that. I hope that answers that. I don't think we've had any kind of chat about that, so we'll move on to the next one if you want. Then, shall we?
I was just going to quickly add, just about obviously about the payment of the rent and everything. Obviously, they are in a legally binding agreement with the landlord to pay.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, like you say, best to discuss early on with your landlord if you can come to an arrangement if you are struggling to pay the full rent. But obviously, the usual procedures are there in place if the tenant doesn't pay in accordance with the tenancy agreement with regard to the breach. And obviously, if the landlord did want to go ahead with taking possession, to follow that through in the usual way. Not that they want, not that you'd want to go down that route, but it is a legally binding agreement between landlord and tenant, and therefore they should, really be paying the rent. We do have several guides, I think, landlord and tenant guides on Boyce Hatton website, written by Fiona Squire, who's our landlord and tenant expert. So if anybody wants to go over anything that Neil's already discussed on that and any other matters, then the website's boycehatton.co.uk if you wanted to go on there and have a look. But yeah, ideally, like Neil said, to discuss it with the tenant, because they might be able to afford to pay it, they just don't want to pay it for whatever reason, or think they don't have to pay it because of what's happening. So it's best to have that early conversation, but to point out that that is a legally binding agreement they have with the landlord, so they should be paying the rent. So that's all I wanted to add on that bit.
Yeah, no, thank you for adding that. That's a really, really good point. Obviously, and I think some tenants kind of don't take their tenancy agreement seriously. Sometimes I don't think they've realised that what they've actually signed. I think the fact that it is a legal contract, and I think some tenants think they can just go, "Oh, I'm just going to hand my property back or not pay the rent," and they don't realise that they are tied into that contract. So yeah, thank you for adding that. That's a good point. I think so the next question we're getting, and I think James just sort of mentioned this, so thanks James for getting involved there. We are getting landlords, or we are getting tenants, sort of saying, my landlord gets a mortgage holiday, why do I have to pay the rent, basically? And I think the conversation we're having is kind of explaining what a mortgage holiday really means. So obviously, to start with, some mortgage companies aren't offering it to buy-to-let landlords. So they're just saying, if you're a buy-to-let landlord, we're not offering a mortgage holiday to you. So there are some mortgage companies doing that. Some are still saying that it will have an effect on a credit score. So they'll give you a mortgage holiday, but it will still count as a non-payment. So I think some of them are changing their view on that after a bit of kind of pressure. But just if you are a landlord and you're going to take a mortgage holiday, just be really careful check what effect it will have. At the end of the day, it still has to be repaid. I think some tenants think that it's a mortgage holiday, that you never have to repay it. So they kind of think, well, if you're not paying a mortgage, why should I pay my rent? But actually, we're kind of explaining to the tenant that you are paying it. It's just getting added to your mortgage bill, your mortgage amount.
Yeah.
And actually, you're going to pay interest for that for the next 25 years. You're going to pay, so that's £700, probably actually amounts to £800 or £900 by the time you add 25 years interest to it. So, it's kind of trying to explain people these things. The other thing obviously is the big difference is the mortgage company has a charge over your property. So if you don't pay your mortgage, the mortgage company can just repossess your property and get their money back. The difference is with giving a tenant a rent holiday is if you say to tenants you don't have to pay your rent for 3 months, you apart from taking them through a small claims court and getting a county court judgment against them and going down that route, there's no real way of getting that money back if the tenant doesn't keep those payments up in the future. So it's kind of a very different scenario between somebody having a tenant that isn't paying rent and a mortgage company having their person not paying the rent as well. So yeah, I would definitely just kind of, you probably have had that conversation, Jane, I would imagine. But that's kind of what we're saying to our tenants. We're just kind of trying to explain to them exactly what a mortgage holiday means, because I think sometimes the press doesn't cover it quite so well, maybe.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I was just going to reiterate what you said, Neil, about the fact that the landlords still have to pay interest, and that it lengthens the term of the mortgage because they still have to repay the money. It's not like they don't have to pay it.
Yeah,
great stuff. So last poll, and there's been some great chat as well about our timings and having a different focus. So just really for this, was this useful to you? Would you like to see more on the topic? We've already had conversations about having landlord specific ones, so more from that side. If you could just give us your feedback there, and then we're going to step into the Q&A. I just need to check with my expert presenters whether they are still able to stay on, because a lot of people have stuck it through and gone over time. So if you're still available, if we can take a few questions and answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty free. So,
Yeah.
Brilliant. So let's step on, and then we'll need to look at the Q&A, and I'll ask Neil and Rebecca to have a look at the questions in the Q&A, and maybe each of you can pick out one to lead on. And I'm going to throw one in as the starter, because one of the underpinning things that made me think, hey, let's get something in here to help people, was there's been some horror stories about key workers suffering issues with tenancies and being thrown out and things like that. And I just wondered whether there's anything specific that you can throw up as advice, guidance, or offer of help regarding, you know, our key workers and particular issues that they might be having.
I think from my point of view, I think I know there's been kind of probably one fairly high profile case, I think, within Bristol, and I think it probably was more to do with the type of tenancy agreement that somebody had. So if you've got an assured short-haul tenancy, you can't just throw someone out of a property because they've got coronavirus, or they might have come into contact with people through their work. If people are just renting a room off you in a house, you've got a lot less protection. So, and I think that was probably the case with this particular person. I'm not 100% sure on the whole kind of circumstances behind it, and it's difficult to get the real thing in the press. You sometimes get a distorted view. But I think if anybody is being threatened with being thrown out of a property and they think it breaks the terms of their tenancy, then, you know, we're always happy to give tenants advice on things. Where we can't answer it, then I'm sure Boyce Hatton would be happy to kind of have a chat with people that are being threatened with stuff that they don't think is really within the realms of the tenancy. Other really good sources are things like shelter. So you can contact shelter, they'll give very good advice, and the housing team at the local council, they're very good as well. So I would kind of say to people, really, if you're being threatened with homelessness purely because you're a key worker and you might they're worried that you might kind of probably HMOs, house and multiple occupancies, are probably the biggest thing, where they don't want people walking through the house that might have come into contact with people with coronavirus. And actually, well, that's just, you know, unfortunately, that's just how life is. You can't just make somebody homeless just because they're like a nurse in A&E, you know. So, yeah, seek that advice. Don't just let your landlord do what they want. Go and ask for that advice.
Great. So who wants to pick their first Q&A question?
There's one from Graham that's got a couple of votes, which is about housing benefit and insurances. So I think with that one, most insurance companies and mortgage companies are removing these clauses from their contracts. The only things that if a landlord has got rent guarantee cover through their agent, or they've taken out an insurance policy that offers rent guarantee, we're finding that the main reasons that we're not able to offer houses to people on housing benefit is because they don't meet the criteria for the rent guarantees. So it's not. So we've got a lot of our landlords that have properties, and they're more than happy to have housing benefit tenants in there. They don't have these rent guarantees in place, so they don't need that kind of side of it. Probably about 25% of our tenants are in receipt of housing benefit, so quite a large proportion. And actually, do you know what? So a lot of them are the best tenants we've got. And you've just got to be, if you are a landlord, be open-minded, I think, with housing benefit tenants. Don't automatically say no just because they're on housing benefit. Have a chat with them, find out their circumstances. And I think, if you are a landlord and you've got that clause in your mortgage, or you've got that clause in your property, your building insurance, for instance, have a chat with your providers on those and see whether those clauses can be removed, so that you can kind of open your property up to a bigger market. So hopefully, Graham, that answers a bit of that for you.
I was just going to pick up the couple that have come in from Claire Robinson. So the first one, she said her son's buying a property with a Help to Buy scheme. The offer expires on the 30th of April and they haven't been able to complete. Do we think it can be extended if they can't complete in time? So my advice would be to they need to go to their legal advisor, who will need to approach the scheme providers to request an extension of time, and don't leave it too late. Do it now, as soon as possible. It may be likely, I haven't got any at the moment, so I'm not 100% sure, but it may be likely that they'll follow suit with the other lenders, i.e. that they're extending the offer time due to COVID-19 at the moment. So get onto that as soon as possible is my advice. And then the other one, she said her daughter's investing in a property with her partner as a buy-to-let. It is a house with a basement flat beneath, and they're selling the freehold of the whole building. What kind of mortgage do they need? Now, first and foremost, obviously, would be to go to your broker, your mortgage broker. There is a misconception with people purchasing freehold of the whole building subject to a lease of a ground floor flat or a first floor flat, or vice versa, in that they're seen to be freehold flats, when actually that's not the case at all. And I've dealt with, and I know colleagues have dealt with many property purchases where they have been freehold of the whole building, subject to a lease to a separate leaseholder. And as far as I'm concerned, the advice to lender in that circumstances would be that's absolutely fine. Obviously, you would still need to check the terms of the lease, because effectively you will then be the freeholder or the landlord of that lease, hold interest. So you will definitely need to contact a broker in the first instance, but there should be no issue with getting a mortgage. For instance, I know NatWest that would lend on matters like that, so they're mainstream lender. There is no issues. Obviously, if it's a freehold flat, it's a completely different scenario, which it doesn't sound like from that question. So hopefully that one's been answered. Happy to give you some names and numbers of any brokers if they need any contacts as well.
Great stuff. Neil, do you want to just take one more, and then I think we probably ought to wrap it up at half an hour over.
I've seen, I think a lot of them have kind of been answered. The only one that I've got, see one from Dee. I don't know if Dee is still on. Yes, you are. Hello, Dee. About whether there's any kind of government relief for people if you're counted as being self-employed. From what we understand, they're not counting rental income as self-employment income, which does seem very harsh. I know an awful lot of landlords, that is their business. You know, they especially if you're maybe older and you're using that as a pension. So people buy 2 or 3 properties, and that is their sole income. But what I would say is, you know, have a chat with an accountant, find a good. I don't know if you're local, but there's a couple of really good accountants in the Bay who will quite happily have a chat with you and answer those questions. A lot of them are doing kind of, I know Accounting for Everything, who are just behind me at the office in Paynton here. They're doing kind of live kind of webinars and Facebook lives and things like that pretty much every day, where you can jump on and ask questions to James, who runs that. And so, yeah, have a, you know, sort of ask that question. But from what we understand, I don't think there's any help available, unfortunately.
Certainly have a look at gov.uk as well, the business help section. But yeah, gov.uk is really staying up to date with all the changes as they come through.
Yeah.
I see there's some of the landlord and tenant questions. So just to reiterate, if they want those answering, happy to pass details on. I think Claire's asked another question previously, so happy to answer those. I'll put them to my colleague Fiona. She will be able to help if necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So
right.
We'll look through all the chats afterwards, and we'll work out, and we can send you an email, and you can decide if you want some extra help. So that's been brilliant, and I really want to say thank you to both of you experts for jumping on, giving your time, you know, taking the leap with some new technology and stuff like that. I think it's been brilliant. I've learned a lot, so thank you so much. And obviously we'll look at the feedback and the chat, and we'll work out where we go next with the next set. So thank you massively.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for sorting everything out for us.
Yeah, Andy, thanks ever so much for doing all the behind the scenes stuff and getting it all set up for us. And thank you everyone for joining. We've had a really good bit of feedback from people. Had loads of chat coming through, loads of questions, which has really, I think it kind of adds a lot to these webinars when people get involved. So thanks everyone for getting involved, and hopefully you've all enjoyed it and got some useful stuff on it. Yeah. We are looking at doing another webinar as well. Might be when things get back to normal, even more kind of landlord based. I know Fiona Squires at Voice Hatton it has sort of kindly said that she would get involved in a webinar aimed more at sort of landlords as well. So that's something that we're looking at doing in the future. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah,
great.
Thanks for joining us as well.
So recording will be available. I've just put a bit.ly link there, bit.ly/property lockdown, but you'll get an email as soon as the recording's available. You can forward it on as well, and anyone can access it afterwards. And if you're interested in any more webinars, we've got a number of webinars we've done on change management, obviously process improvement and continuous improvement, and the best way to do that. But lots of change management, this property stuff. So go and have a look at our channel. There's plenty that are available pre-recorded. I'd recommend the Control Dartboard one for those that are struggling with change at the moment. It's well worth a look. And thank you very much for staying for a very long time for that webinar. Yeah. And we'll see you next time. And thanks.
Thanks guys. Bye.
Bye then.
Bye.